Ah, teve um problema aqui. Acho que tem que mudar alguma medida de tempo. Ele está me dando...
Está lá, aparece live. Está live.
Não, tá tudo certinho, professor.
Tá bom.
Tudo ok. Pode começar as apresentações.
Estamos live no Google.
A Nádia okay. Vai dirigir. Não é melhor pôr uma tela única assim, para começar? Vou deixar a direção para a Nádia. Então, boa tarde a todos e todas que nos ouvem através do YouTube e do Facebook. Espero que esteja tudo bem com vocês. And then I will speak a little bit in English slowly. And I want to introduce this panel today, which is called Media Realities. And we have the privilege of having here with us in the StreamYard studio, Professor Marcus Novati from University of California, Santa Barbara, and Professor Lokia Alavano, maybe I said it wrong, and Professor Dimitri Charitos, both from Athens in Greece. So we hope we're going to have a fine conversation, and Professor Dimitri Lokia and Marcus Novak will tell us about their work. They will show some videos and images and text. So we'll do our best to understand the English, and eventually I will translate if necessary. In some points I could translate. So welcome Marcus, Dimitris, and Lokia, and we hope that this will not be the last time that the University of São Paulo contacts Greece and Greek scholars, and thanks Marcus Novak for making this introduction. And I have met Marcus Novak only once in São Paulo, Brazil, when we have a good time together visiting the University of São Paulo. So we hope that this will be the beginning maybe of some form of collaboration. So now I will let Adriana Bobilho making the introductions in Portuguese, so everyone who is listening to us will understand better. Okay?
Good evening. Thank you for coming, lecturers and classmates. Welcome, everybody. The topic of today's meeting, Media Realities, in Alterscience panel. So the lectures, Marcus Novak asked for permission to present them in Portuguese. Marcus Novak, artista, compositor e arquiteto multifacetado, nasceu em Caracas e estudou arquitetura com especialização em programas de desenho industrial. Pesquisador da Universidade de Texas desde a década de 90 e atualmente é diretor do laboratório Translab na Universidade da Califórnia. Trabalhando com arquitetura não tradicional, seu pensamento de design origina-se com a exploração de potencial espacial de novas tecnologias digitais, composições algorítmicas e música. Em particular, Novak analisa conformações desenvolvendo teorias a respeito de hipersuperfícies, uma combinação híbrida de invisibilidade e virtualidade. Em sua carreira profissional inovadora, levou a cunhar novos termos como arquitetura líquida e transarquitetura, juntamente com música navegável, cinema habituável e arquimúsica, e vários outros termos que ilustram bem os seus métodos de design. Esses neologismos incluem o termo arquitetura líquida, cunhado na publicação de Arquitetura Líquida do Cyberespaço, de 1993. Novak afirma que, no que diz respeito à arquitetura, o termo líquido se refere a uma entidade animista, animada, metafórmica, que atravessa fronteiras categóricas e requer as operações cognitivamente sobrecarregadas do pensamento poético. O cyberespaço é líquido. Cyberespaço líquido, arquitetura líquida, cidades líquidas. A arquitetura líquida é mais do que arquitetura cinética, arquitetura robótica e arquitetura de paredes fixas e links variáveis. A arquitetura líquida é uma arquitetura que respira e pulsa. A arquitetura líquida torna cidades líquidas, cidades que mudam com valores variáveis, onde visitantes de diferentes origens veem diferentes pontos de referência, onde bairros variam de acordo com ideias comuns e evoluem conforme as ideias amadurecem ou se dissolvem. Leonias Palpatolo vive e trabalha em Atenas, cria animações e instalações multicanais que exploram o lugar do cinema em relação ao desejo. Exposições individuais recentes incluem Next Door to Alice, Rodeo Gallery, Istanbul, Chup Chup, Upstairs, Berlim, e Leonias Palpatolo nas galerias Haas e Fischer, desculpem a pronúncia, em Zurique. A mostra coletiva inclui identidade, corpo, memórias, encontros, via Farini e 4 jovens artistas femininas nas galerias de Zurique. Ela é graduada em fotografia pelo Royal College of Art e diz que, através das minhas animações e instalações multicanais, exploro minha linguagem do cinema em relação ao desejo. Minha prática envolve as associações linguísticas que podem ser feitas entre o processo de mascaramento da animação e a máscara feminina. De acordo com a análise de Mary Ann Dorn sobre o assunto, a mascarada nega a produção da feminilidade como proximidade, uma vez que institui um distanciamento crítico do espectador feminino. Eu, Leonias, exploro essa ideia através do mascaramento e remotamente de linguagens e sons fragmentados do filme, como extravagantes partes do corpo feminino. A forma como vídeos são instalados lida como fragmentação e tempo fílmico. As instalações são muitas vezes multicanais e a distância entre as telas e o espectador é um fator importante levado em consideração. E o terceiro palestrante é Dimitris Charitos, que é um professor associado da Faculdade de Comunicação e Estudo de Mídia da Universidade Nacional de Atenas, Capodistria. Desde 2002, ele leciona comunicação humano-computador, arte e tecnologia e comunicação visual, design virtual em nível de graduação, bem como design de ambientes mediados digitalmente, design interativo, música e novas mídias em nível de pós-graduação. Ele também lecionou em nível de graduação e pós-graduação desde 94 na Escócia, na Grécia, no Departamento de Informática da Universidade de Atenas e Escola de Arquitetura. Ele estudou design de arquitetura, design auxiliado por computador, e tem PhD em design interativo e design de ambiente virtual. Desde 96, ele é autor e coautor de mais de 90 publicações em livros, periódicos ou anais de conferências. Como investigador ou coordenador, participou de mais de 15 projetos de investigação financiados por programas gregos ou europeus nas temáticas de realidade virtual, design interativo, meios locativos, cidades mediadas, híbridas e arte digital. Como artista de novas mídias, ele produziu música eletrônica, instalações audiovisuais interativas e ambientes virtuais. Ele participou de 15 exposições na Grécia, Reino Unido, Canadá e Chipre. Show. Precisa isso.
Now we're going to start. Thank you very much, Adriana. And we're going to start with Dimitris Charitos, or Charitos. How should we say your name, please?
Well, it's Charitos, but Lucia, did you want to start? No? 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 I thought you did.
We cannot hear her.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yes, I wouldn't mind starting if
Yeah, go on, please. Yeah.
But is Professor Matuk, is that fine? You are the host.
No, please go ahead. I have misunderstood you.
Curators. If you think it's up to you. You
Go
tell me.
ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I go then. Okay, so hi, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a real honor. What amazing synergies. Thank you, Professor Matuk. And it's great to meet you all. Let me share my screen now. So I don't see myself, I don't see the application anymore, but I hope you see my screen, right? Yes. Okay, I'm going for it. An introduction has been made. I just want to say a few things about my background. I'm originally from Greece. I'm a visual artist and filmmaker. I lived in the UK for a long time. That's where I started experimenting with the moving image. And the past 7 years, I've been doing residencies in different European institutions, artist residencies. My practice is research-based and interdisciplinary, often influenced by psychoanalysis. So in this talk, I will adopt a kind of practice-based approach. I will talk of how I arrived. I will put the focus on showing how I arrived using the medium of virtual reality. In the past 3 years, I've been experimenting a lot with virtual realities. And I want to show the conceptual background and the research behind the work. Towards the end of the talk, I will focus on my latest film. It's a very recent film. It has not even been shown yet, premiered. It's a 20-minute production on the way to Colonos, a VR 360 film. And it's important to show how the process of arriving at that place. Now, thematically, something that I have always been encountering in my work is nostalgia and mourning for the collective experience of cinema. It's something that keeps coming back. Now, I think this, in our pandemic times, it's even a more urgent topic right now, right? More than ever before. I hope this translation is it's done online by a machine. I hope it's fine, the Portuguese that has been translated. So a few things about the background of my practice. In my older works, I used to use installation, and I always was interested in creating a kind of enclosed space where the viewer had a solitary experience using various objects and moving image. For me, this is a kind of dream space that is similar to a VR experience. When we're experiencing VR, we are solitary viewers. I use associative montage. It's like a collage, collaging different elements from photographs to disembodied cartoon characters, archival footage, and so on. And my aim is to explore the mechanics of media in constructing history and manipulating our perception of reality. it's important to say that I see my whole practice as a kind of homage to dying technologies. So I use technology, even virtual reality, in order to comment, to critique on technology itself and on the accelerated change in technologies. And often the focus is on sound. I'm interested in the radicality of sound in cinema in general. This is an installation view from a piece I did called Dictator, using the voice of my grandmother when she was suffering from Alzheimer's disease, mixed with newsreels from the dictatorship time in Greece. I don't have time to show that, but I will move on now. So this is New Horizon pilot. We are seeing the poster. It was my first VR experiment when I started experimenting with XR technologies. I wanted to use storytelling in relation to the VR solitary experience and see what can happen there. Let me say a few things about the conceptual background of the work, and then I will show a clip. Sound is very important. So I came across this amazing futuristic propaganda public relation documentary from 1940 called Two New Horizons. It was propagandizing Futurama exhibition for General Motors, talking about a modern utopia of expressways, freeways, 7-lane highways connecting the United States. It's a kind of optimistic anticipation of the 60s, right? Now, this propaganda film was the trigger for my VR film, and there were 3 key points, 3 reasons behind my motivations. The first is this propaganda hypnotizing male narrator's voice. He was talking about new horizons, new opportunities, new technologies, promises of distant horizons that always have called man forward, right? And this kind of propaganda voice haunted me. Secondly, I kind of fell for this image that I discovered. The image we are seeing is a diorama that they were planning to make for the exhibition. It's a photomontage, actually. It's not an actual photograph, but they were planning to make this. So they would display the Futurama, and above it, they paired heterosexual couples that were looking at that model from above, right? And what is very interesting to me is that there were propaganda speakers embodied on the chairs, speaking directly into the inner ears of the participant. So this is, to me, an early XR experiment. There's something really immersive about this image. Interestingly, this was never executed, what we're seeing there, this photomontage, because the Second World War happened. Now, the third reason behind my motivation was I was fascinated by the fact that this film, this propaganda film, was filmed from above, from a helicopter, showing rural America from a helicopter. And it's a bit like an early Google Maps experience, right? So I adapted a similar approach. I took this voice, this male propaganda voice with me. And at the time, I had arrived back to Greece after being a long time away, and I rediscovered the post-industrial area in the west of Athens, where I'm doing a lot of extensive research, called Aspropyrgos, where I was discovering an opposite reality to what I was hearing in that film. It's a kind of very toxic post-industrial place. So I took this optimistic voice and juxtaposed it with images that I filmed there from above. This is a derelict factory, for instance. This is what I called a graveyard for ships. Greek tycoons dump their ships in a nearby town, in Elefsina it's called. And there's an earthquake happening here, but I'm carrying on. So I took this dystopic landscape and I juxtaposed it to the voice. Let me play you a clip, and then I will talk about the installation.
In a restless search for new opportunities and new ways of living, the mystery and the promise of distant horizons always have called men forward. First wondering, then searching, then continuing to explore. men have moved on and on, always to find that old horizons open the way to new horizons. In a search that has continued for centuries, some far distant view, with its promise of the unseen and its promise of the unknown, has forever fathered the impulse to seek for new things in new places, new horizons. As distant families have become neighbors, and as people have constantly widened their viewpoints while multiplying the number of their contacts, more desires have developed to be satisfied.
Okay, so this was a VR 180 film, and this was how it was displayed. I also paired people, but in a playful way. They're watching a VR film, but they're not interacting, as it usually happens today, more high-tech works. Each is looking at the illusory horizon. Again, this is a homage to dying technologies in some ways. Then I want to speak about another work, but I'm losing an image here. Yes, an earlier work that I did was a stereoscopic film, which brought me to VR, using, again, this kind of vertical perspective. This is when my grandmother had died, and I went to her house and filmed the objects in the house before they were, it was emptied out for good. This work is called Sleeping Hero 4, and I used these objects in her house, but also a lot of Foley sounds. I don't know if you are familiar with Foley, but Foley, I will speak about it extensively, is in cinema is sounds made of objects. It's a craft, right? And I have a big fascination and collection of Foley sounds from various films. Here in this work, I used Foley sounds from early Hollywood, British films of the 50s, and post-war Greek films. So for you to see this work, you usually would have to wear this paper. Let me show you. It's here, the image. This is the installation. You these paper glasses that are stereoscopic. Again, a homage to dying technologies. I will play a small excerpt and then speak about Foley. Usually you would have to wear the glasses to see it, but now we're seeing it without the glasses.
Δόξα τω Θεώ, κοριτσάκι μου, είσαι καλά. Ήρθα να σε καθησυχάσω. Για να δεις ότι δεν έπαθα τίποτα εκείνη την καταραμένη νύχτα. Μόνο που ζαλίστηκα λιγάκι. Έλα, μην είσαι πεισματάρα. Ξέχασε τα όλα και θα δεις. Έλα, πάμε σπίτι. Και δεν σου ξαναπώ ποτέ πια να παντρευτείς αυτό που θέλω εγώ. Δώσ' μου το χεράκι σου.
Remember, when the clock strikes 12, you must be home by then. For should you fail to be in bed, you'll be in rags again. Remember, remember, remember. My ladies.
So I'm going to say now a little bit about Foley. For those of you who might not be familiar, this is a Foley studio. Foley is a craft. In most mainstream films, even in Hollywood, a Foley artist has performed. The Foley artist performs with their body using various objects in the Foley studio, and they create an auditory performance. So let's say that an actor is smoking or walking. The Foley artist would perform that in real time. And they used his or her performance in order to save time, in order not to have to cut a lot in the sound design, right? So Foley is one of cinema's, as I see it, best kept secrets, and an area that has been largely ignored in film studies. The Foley studio is a space that is never shown in films, but is present in the acoustic sphere. Foley objects are stripped of their exchange value and gained a new kind of value, right? So if I may use the term, there's something really ecological about Foley. Objects have a different use, they're being recycled. And I have always been questioning, why do we know so little about Foley? This is a Foley artist at work. Foley artists were usually not credited throughout the history of cinema. They would perform and record sound, but those performances do not survive. And I wonder, is it because Foley is a kind of blind spot in the medium of cinema? And okay, I see this as a kind of big loss. So sometimes I've been thinking there are so many crappy films that have amazing Foley sound. I would have rather seen the Foley artist performing than the actual films. This is not always the case, but sometimes it is. So I have created a big library of Foley sounds that I use in my work. Now I'm going to show you a little excerpt from one of the very few films that have ever exposed the mechanisms of Foley. It's made by Terry Burke, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Track Stars, The Unseen Heroes of Movie Sounds from 1979. And the director was a Foley artist himself, unsurprisingly. Let's have a look. So we saw what is seen on the screen and what's behind it on the audio sphere. So I would argue that Foley objects can be seen as signs stripped of their exchange or symbolic or sign value. And I propose that their function can be compared to that of waste or detritus that is collected by the child at play. I'm using the term detritus borrowed by Benjamin, who compares the child at play with actually the rubbish collector, the rag picker, the hoarder who hoards objects. Benjamin used this term when looking at Freud's ideas and studies on children playing, right? So I'm comparing that. I think there's a lot of similarity to Foley. On the other hand, the Foley soundtrack is detached from the action in the film. It is post-synchronized, exposing another presence, that of the Foley artist who performs unseen. So could it be argued that Foley exposes the present, creating a kind of Brechtian alienation effect? And does Foley in that sense have a radical potential? Why does cinema persistently treat the existence of Foley as a kind of blind spot that is kept unseen? Why do we know so little about Foley? Now, recently I started looking into the relation of Foley art and VR technology, right? Virtual reality experience. I'm interested in the fact that although Foley work is a craft, there are similar processes between its creation by the Foley artist and the experience of the VR viewer, right? The VR viewer is present. When we are in a VR space, we are present in the experience, while her body, the body of the VR viewer, is not present. The same applies for the Foley artist who has created the sound. She or he, the Foley artist, has performed with her body, but her body is never present, is never seen. In that sense, there is a kind of mirroring between the process of creating Foley sound and this process of experiencing a VR work, especially if that VR work incorporates Foley in its sound design. So I believe this mirroring creates a kind of uncanny, dreamlike experience for the viewer, similar to what Freud calls the dream work. So with all these thoughts in mind, I started going into the film that I talked to you before about On the Way to Colonos. This film is filmed, it's a VR film made in the post-industrial place again of Aspropyrgos in Western Athens, the Thriasian plain, at a Romani ghetto, a ghetto where Romani people live, a Romani community. The place is called Nea Zoe. Paradoxically, this in Greek means new life. I say paradoxically because there's kind of something very dystopic about this place. Now, the Romani people I met there became the actors of this film. And this place, this ghetto, is where a lot of discharged objects from the nearby city, Athens, end up at, right? But also marginal communities are being pushed there. So, me and the people of Nea Zoe, we created a lot of Foley sounds from the locations. There was a lot of material I can assure you. And, but I see a very interesting metaphor between the Romani people of Nea Zoe and the Foley artist, actually. They're all unseen heroes. So what I wanted to do in this film, besides making those sounds with them, was to turn them into the heroes of the film. They became the protagonists, right? Society has marginalized them, but in this film, they are protagonists. Let me say a few things about the story now. Those two were the main characters of the film. So, coincidentally, as I was researching Nea Zoe, I discovered this play by Sophocles, the Greek tragedian Sophocles. The play is Oedipus at Colonos. Oedipus at Colonos is a highly overlooked play. It has hardly ever been staged in theaters or turned into a film. I asked why. Why is this so ignored? My explanation is because it deals with the taboo subject of old age. Now, I will tell you about the story. Sophocles wrote this play when he was old himself, and it presents Oedipus as a blind man. He's blind, he's old, he's vulnerable, and he's speaking, defending himself against the real criminals who are the gods. The most important thing is that he's a political exile who leaves Thebes and go to Colonos of Athens. Colonos is an area in Athens today, traveling with his daughter and sister Antigone, and he's looking for asylum. He's looking for a place that he can live and die peacefully. So he's not unlike so many heroes of our times, Romani outcasts or refugees who travel from Middle East to Europe today, right? What I discovered, which I found fascinating, was that this play was very popular amongst the kind of theater in Greece called bouloukia. These are crowds, bunches who were traveling and staging different plays in villages in Greece up until the 50s. Now, why was this play so popular amongst bouloukia? Perhaps it is because in the actual story, it deals itself with a foreigner entering a community. So there's a kind of mirroring of the actual process. So that's how I worked myself. I feel that there was a mirroring with our film. We were entering this foreign ghetto, right? So we improvised a lot with the people of Nea Zoe, but I think there's a metaphor on the second level with VR. In VR, we are a foreign body entering the VR space, right? Also, there's something really theatrical about the VR camera. The VR camera is not pointing at a subject like in cinema. It's including, it's inclusive. It's interesting that Antonin Artaud is one of the first who used the term virtual reality. This camera is democratic. It creates a theater stage. The crew was seen. We were seen also. We acted in the film. So I spent a year forming bond with the people in the community. I'm improvising there. The sounds, as I said, were a lot of Foley work, but also we used soap opera echoes from the TVs that we found in the dwellings. Soap opera is a kind of low art, but it speaks itself about Oedipal conflicts, patricide, murder. So this kind of echoes fed into the film. But last, I want to say that one of the cinematographic influences of the film was an amazing, to me, photographer, Greek photographer called Leonidas Palpatolo. Now, his work has been haunting me for years. he was traveling he was an early 20th century photographer who would go during the Balkan Wars in early 20th century to different communities, in the Balkan communities, and he would ask the inhabitants to form circles around his camera, tight circles, next to their deceased, next to the dead, right? I find something really immersive. It was very early for VR, but there's something really immersive about the way he used his camera. And we created some tableau vivant, having these haunting images in mind. But I mean, look at this image, right? Especially in our COVID times, there's something quite fascinating. Now that we are not even able to gather around our deceased, I find them fascinating. And I would like to close this talk. I will show you a short clip from On the Way to Colonos, but I want to close with the thought I had recently. So I would propose, could these corpses that have a central play in the community-based immersive photos of Leonidas Palpatolo be seen as an early and accidental metaphor for the present absent body of the VR viewer before VR ever existed? What do I mean by that? Could we, VR viewers, be seen as a kind of cadaver, as a metaphor of this body that is present and absent at the same time in the VR space? So I will now, do I have time to show a little bit from the film? Yes?
Yes, good, but you know, one alert, your screen sometimes becomes black. So if it does, look at the text, at the chat that we will be telling you.
Okay, but okay,
Sorry.
Professor. Yes. Could you see my screen so far? Could you see my screen so far? Yes? Okay.
Yeah, only one time he went black for one or 2 minutes. Only one time.
Okay. So I will show you just a little VR excerpt. Let's try it. Let's try it. And that, okay. So.
And guess what? This stranger might not be necessarily friendly with the two migrants that have invaded his land. And there are good reasons for the stranger's suspicious behavior, as this poor stranger has never been a migrant himself, but was always a local amongst locals. The chorus, made out of locals, will follow, and they will be hostile too.
Get out of here quickly! Get out of our country! Get out! So damaged and so low, where were you born? Who are you? Poor old man, now you're obliged to tell us your story.
Okay. I'm stopping the shared screen. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, let's check.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So my audio is not very good at all. I'm sorry. Yeah. What can you tell us? What were they saying? Get out of my country or something? They're complaining something like a political act.
Yes. Get out of my country. It's actually the chorus of the play in Sophocles. There's something really contemporary about this play. The chorus is a hostile chorus. So when Oedipus first enters this foreign land, they are very hostile with him.
And that's interesting that the chorus is hostile. Because
Yes.
usually, like in the church, the chorus is very benevolent.
It's interesting you say that, the first time that one of the most known performances of this play was gospel, was made in gospel. Yes, in the 80s.
You mentioned these groups of Greeks in the 19th century, and as I understood, until 1950, like this traveling theater performers, and
Yes.
they will travel through Greece, showing their plays, and they're called bolikia, or how do you call them?
Buluka is a word for crowds. It means crowds, bunches. I feel nostalgic for this word because we cannot form crowds now, but during COVID times. They were crowds, but there's something really radical about them. They were considered as low art, not high art, but there's something really radical about them, I believe.
Why? Why are they radical?
There's something really radical in the sense that they would go and kind of collaborate with the community, right? They were not up there on the stage, high art. There's something, if I may use the term, immersive about it for me. The fact that they were entering a community and forming this theatrical space with the community using props that they found there. They had to improvise each time. And there's very little documentation of them, actually. And I found it fascinating that Oedipus at Colonos was considered as very secondary by high art, but Boulouka played it all the time. They loved this. So I started wondering why.
Yeah, and then like you mentioned psychoanalysis also. Like, I'm sorry, I'm talking all the time, but and maybe Marcos and Dimitri could talk too and could ask questions, or maybe our public could send questions. But why you think was so popular among them? Why you think that play was interested in this kind of group? Like, why?
Why? Okay. I think there are two reasons. One is a bit of a boring explanation. And the second is the reason I find fascinating. The first reason is that it had big monologues. So the actors of Boulouka who wanted to become more famous had a chance to have a go, right, and become stars. The second and more fascinating for me is that there's this mirroring. So a foreigner entering a community is what these Boulouka theaters were doing, which is at the core of the story, and which is what I experienced. I went to do this film in one of the most hardcore ghettos of Greece. Dimitris might know Nea Zoe. It's really, really, really difficult and ghettoized area, and it was amazing finding a way to go in there and collaborating with people. This act of entering as a foreigner. Metaphorically, I'm talking. I was not there. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lucia, did you spend? You said you spend a lot of time with them. Did you tell us a couple of words about the process, the ethnographic aspect of it? It sounds very interesting.
Yes, it's amazing. First of all, we have made a huge archive of sounds. We recorded, I mean, this is a language, the particular dialect they speak there that is completely undocumented. And I felt this was precious material in my hands. So we have created a huge audio archive, which I'm using in other works now that I'm making. This was a real collaboration also, but it took about half a year to find ways to enter the community. Everybody was telling me it will be impossible to go there. And it's actually through the school, the primary school. There's a primary school there. They're doing a heroic job. These teachers there who helped me to get to know the community. But I have a lot of plans collaborating and doing more works. And now I'm doing it with the children of Nea Zoe. We had to stop because of the pandemic, but we will carry on making some kind of interactive VR applications that they will be able to use in their phones together. with Foley also, all those objects and the Foley sounds we recorded that I talked about.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Okay, should we carry on now to Dimitri? So,
Okay, give me a second and I will share my presentation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucia. Very good. Very good. So let's see. Screen sharing. Yeah, I'll just share screen. Yeah, do you see my presentation?
Yes, now we do.
Yeah, excellent. So I've structured this presentation somehow in a way that I will refer to some older work that I've been doing back in the 90s with virtual reality technology, and then I will come back to more of today's stuff. Basically, because I believe that when we start discussing about virtual reality technology, there's a lot of issues that we have been working with many years ago, and although the technology has matured a lot, I guess the creative aspect of it has not really matured that much. So there's still a lot of experimental work needed to provide answers for what do we design in these spaces. Yeah, and I have to say that I'm very happy to sort of present this next to Marcos, because Marcos, when I started working with VR, was a huge inspiration, because he's basically one of the first people globally that has experimented with immersive worlds, and particularly with their multisensory aspect, meaning that he experimented with the visual and the auditory compositional potential of this medium. Anyway, so of course there's there's different kinds of experiences that we can compose that may integrate 3D graphics and interactive 3D graphics with physical spaces in different ways. And at the one end of the continuum, you have the immersive virtual environments, which are immaterial, let's say, and on the other end, you have interactive worlds, which are mainly comprising physical objects. And in between, there's all sorts of different hybrid kind of mediated experiences of space, which contain 3D graphics somehow, so that a certain representation of space that's not materially there is presented to people, but at the same time, this is integrated with physical elements. So I'll quickly say that my interest in researching virtual reality was from the perspective of designing space in there, and I was interested to investigate how to design space and spatial experiences, so to say, and how to understand the impact of these experiences to the humans that were immersed in these environments. And back in the 90s, you couldn't even discuss the possibility of multi-user worlds. You were always talking about single-user worlds. So I experimented a lot with trying to understand how people interact in space, how they navigate in these spaces are composed, they orientate and all that, and how the experience of space in virtual environments somehow is recorded in their memory. So the environmental knowledge that is being created as a result of this worlds. And very quickly, I just want to mention, stress the fact that space in virtual environments doesn't have to be contiguous or continuous. You can teleport from here to there without actually having to go through the distance. And many principles of real space can be violated in virtual environments. And that brings to mind what Marcos and you and Michael Benedict were writing in Cyberspace First Steps back in 1990, I think, or 91 it was, yeah. Of course, there's no physical constraints in these worlds. And the problem when you design space is that constraints are helpful, but here you have no constraints. So when you need to simulate a space, things are kind of straightforward. You try to imitate reality in the best way possible. But when you have to compose a set of new forms in order to accommodate some human activities, then that's really what interested me, so to say. So how much of the reality we live in, of the physical reality, do we need to carry with us in virtual worlds? Can we do away with all the reality and create worlds that have absolutely no grasp and no relation to the ones that we live in? I'm not going to give you a lot of information about results, but I'll quickly go through some of the experiments I conducted back then. So I was trying to propose a taxonomy of kinds of spaces that are let me just show this. Yeah, taxonomy of spaces that we could compose in these worlds: paths, places, intersections, domains, and then these spaces would be basically there by virtue of the objects that were composed in the environments, and that they would define them. And these could be landmarks, boundaries, thresholds, and signs, and then semiotics kick in. And then I conducted a series of experiments to try to understand how human behavior, navigational behavior, and spatial behavior in general would be affected by some settings of that sort. I don't want to bore you with the details of it. Now, I was lucky, many years after that, I was lucky to collaborate with a PhD student of mine, and who wanted to continue this research. And so he put together a set of more interesting experiments. It's so great to see that your students are becoming much better than yourself, I guess. It's great indeed. And so these are some of the worlds that he put together in order to study human spatial behavior. Marcos, this is Haris Rizopoulos' work to study human behavior in these worlds, and in a way to study different kinds of formations around certain situations and activities, and how people felt about that. Yeah, so it's very interesting for us to understand the affective impact of these spaces, because the conception of user experience includes human emotions a lot. Yeah, and some of this work led to the design of several compositions. Like, this is an applied work. This is a virtual museum that I designed for the for a research project in the University of Athens back in 2001. And this was actually immersive with old technologies. And we incorporated there the objects from 9 existing museums and the Museum of Cycladic Art. Now,
Dimitri,
yes.
One question. Could you enlarge a little bit the screen presentation? I think it's just, if you just start the presentation, it will be larger.
I can't hear you very well, Artur. I'm sorry. I can't hear you very well.
Could you enlarge your presentation?
It's my presentation is enlarged already in my screen.
If you click on exhibiting, maybe like I'm not sure how to explain, but the PowerPoint allows you to a full screen.
Yeah, I've done that. I've done that. Let me
Okay.
share it again.
Okay.
Yeah, is it better now?
Maybe, but you know, we still see your slides presentation in the left, and I think there's a way like to enlarge a little bit.
Well, in my screen, it is. I've pressed the screen button, so it's full screen in my computer.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know why it's like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Okay,
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. So one thing we are working on now is that we have a master's course on the design of virtual environments, and what we do there is we sort of study the methodology of how we design virtual environments, and mainly we're working on not very applied projects because most of the students that we select are not IT scientists. They're literature students, artists, communication students, historians, or whatever. And we teach these people how to program with Unity or with Blender or with how to 3D model and build these worlds. And yeah, maybe these worlds do not usually become very high-tech, savvy or whatever, but they quite often have very interesting content. Because I think one thing that I see in a lot of virtual reality projects that are being built is that they don't really utilize, they don't explore the potential of virtual reality as a medium. So we work a lot on the methodology of how to do this. So you know, so this is a sort of a diagram of where we focus on this methodology. It's all in Greek. I'm sorry about that. I couldn't translate it. I didn't have time to do that. I'll quickly take you now, because I'm probably running out of time. I quickly take you to some art projects that I promised to talk about some of the compositional issues with VR. And one thing that I find very interesting lately is to work with the integration of 3D graphics and video. And because what we learned from video art is that each video screen is presenting another three-dimensional space in an installation space, and so the same applies to when you introduce video as an element applied on 3D graphics or worlds composing of 3D graphics. So this is an early experiment and a work that I did with my colleague Koti back in '99, and it's an interactive. It's a virtual environment where you fly around to actually compose the sound aspect of the piece, and this is what you see when you enter these little objects. And like here, I mean, is an experiment of how to use texture mapping techniques as a compositional element, a tool or whatever. And here is something else we did that we experimented in a similar manner. It's a piece that we did with my colleagues Haris, Penny, and Iuliani. And what we did is that we worked with photographs of the Athens urban landscape that we texture mapped onto a three-dimensional assemblage, and and this that the people would interact with this in a sort of a semi. It's not an immersive interface and that's another issue that I'm very interested in. How to. I mean, I love using HMDs, hand-mounted displays, but I find very interesting when you use large projection systems where you can actually interact with virtual worlds in a more sort of embodied kind of manner, that you need to actually move your body a lot to actually exert, to actually affect the movement of these worlds. So that I feel that there's a certain interesting performative aspect in this kind of interaction, and certainly this exhibition was that case. This was an exhibition about performance and urban space. So we decided to use a virtual environment to actually get the audience to interact with this, and so in this manner the audience became performers. I don't have much time to show you the video, but I will quickly take you to another experiment that we did in large-scale projection based systems with VR. Here we learned a lot from sort of this artistic experimentation process in the context of the EMDL project that we collaborated with the University of Plymouth, the University of Vienna, and SAT in Montreal. And we created this immersive space where 4 or 5 people could interact with parts of the space and actually transform the visual and the audio form of elements of this composition. Now, before how much time do I have? Do I have any time, actually?
Dimitri, while you paused, were your images advancing for you? Because for us, they were fixed on one image.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, they were advancing, certainly. Yeah. What are you seeing now?
Whatever image was selected in the beginning in your PowerPoint. A perspective of a space in the beginning with the Athens on it.
Well, okay, so you've lost several images. I don't know why, but they were advancing here for sure. Anyway, let me. Do I have 5 minutes or something, or am I running out of time?
I would say yes. You have time, 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
We're not counting, so
I'll try. I'll try to share the whole screen. Maybe it works better this way. Yeah. So I'll share the whole screen now. Let's see if it works like that. So I want to show you the latest work we have done, which incorporates virtual environments, but only in a part of it. Like, do you see the screen now? This is a website, actually, the website of the project.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you see it?
Yes. Yes. Now we can.
Yeah. So this is a project we finished. We were lucky enough to finish it last March. So we were about to do the opening when coronavirus broke, and so we never did the opening for this piece. But however, it's still there, and I would just hope that after it's possible to actually do any exhibition openings, that we will be able to do an opening for this piece. So what it is about? This is a piece that collects that data. It's actually four installations connected to a central system, which so if I can show you quickly the architecture of the system. This is the architecture of the system. We have a set of sensors that we deploy. Some measure sort of environmental parameters. Some others measure generally environmental parameters, and then we have an interface through a smartphone that asks people for information about how they feel about things. So people become human sensors. So all this information goes into the server and feeds for interactive works. And I'll quickly show you this interactive works. The one is an installation piece. Here is the projection that unfortunately it's empty. There's no people because coronavirus is here. So this projection here is what you see in the website. It's exactly the same. It's live now. It's a real-time visualization of the data that's being captured from the environment. It's about measurements from pollution, from light, temperature, sound levels, and all that. And the information that people send is also visualized in this interface and is projected here, here. And there's a similar kind of embodied interaction that can take place because we have a tracker here that tracks human movement. So 3, 4, 5 people can interact with some elements of this visualization. Now, here we've built a sound installation. It's a 6-channel sound installation which feeds off the pollution data and sonifies the pollution data. We have also created a series of kinetic sculptures which are incorporating some found objects. So it's like things like that, that we use motors to actually pluck the objects, or we hack we hacked a couple of scanners to use their motors and to create sounds out of scratches and screeches and whatever. And these are also feeding off the data. And there's a dialogue between the electronically produced sounds and the sounds which are non-amplified and are produced by the movement. And there's a kinesthetic element to it. Now, the other aspect is that this piece here that feeds off the text that people provide to the installation. So it's like the installation asks you, how do you feel about what you see here? Or how do you feel about what you hear? Or how do you feel about what you smell here that you are now? Yeah. And so in a sense, the human becomes a sensor and in a subjective way tells you how they feel about where they are. And all this is captured, of course, and then it asks you how you feel in general about anything you want. And this is a little text that you can input there. And this text is quickly projected in this LED matrix panels that are in the installation space. Yeah. And so let me quickly go to here. And these are also projected. Now that we cannot go there, actually, here's a video of the space. It's very short. It's 1 minute. And the last piece is this light installation, which interacts with the noise levels. So as the noise goes up, this the light goes down, and as the noise quietens, then the lights go up. And but it also provides the ability to the spectator to actually interact with one of the lights.
Ανάλογα με τη φωνή μου.
And finally, what I found very interesting is that right now all the text input from the smartphones of people is actually passing through the website. So I think now that in COVID times we can't actually visit the place, the website becomes a very important element of this work until we actually are able to go back there and enjoy the piece in situ. I don't want to bore you more with this. I would be very happy to answer any questions if you want. It was not a very coherent presentation. It was more like things I felt like showing you rather than a more well-structured presentation. Thank you for the invitation and for being here.
Well, Dimitri, we should thank you. It was very stimulating, and maybe I should mention that this graduate class that we are in, it's a project that I create with the stimulus of my friends, and it's called Alterscience, and it's also it is like a challenge to students and to myself and everyone that collaborates with me to create another concept for science in a way. And for me, it's very personal, because I think animals should not be experimented. That animals should be regarded as beings with rights as human beings, and also the rivers, the mountains, and the planet. Like Brazilian Indians consider that the mountain, the rivers, the waters are persons, So it's another question. But anyway, what you stimulate me to ask you is that a lot of your installations are trying to capture data or to capture the impressions of people. So somehow it's a way of knowing realities that we are not able to translate. And I'm not sure, there's a term, it's called a transduction. So transduction will be a translation between different dimensions. And so like when you translate audio into light, would you be doing a transduction? And how can we use all of these concepts? Like, is this a metaphor? Like your work could be read as a metaphor for our inability to know certain dimensions of our reality. Anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, of course, it's a transduction, and the word translation was exactly at the core of what we were doing. I mean, the team that we did this last piece is a very big team. We're 10 people, so it's a big project. So I'm one of 9 or 10 people that we worked on this, indeed, one of the methodologies were that to actually get input from the environment or from people who were kind enough to tell us how they feel, and of course this will happen when the piece will work properly, in the sense that people will come out and they can go around and start talking about how they feel, because right now I think Anyway, this is a detail. It's a big discussion about how this piece could work in the coronavirus era. But coming back to your question, of course, it's a transduction anyway. Sensors do that anyway. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure the intention was metaphorical. It was more like how can we use a series of sources and transform them into feeds that can help us somehow sculpt some multisensory experiences in ways that become meaningful, but not necessarily through metaphors. I don't know if it makes any sense. In the case of the light sculpture, it's a very simple thing. Yeah, it is a symbolic gesture. Yeah, indeed, and it's a very simple and straightforward symbolic gesture. But in the other pieces, it's not like that. I mean, in the other pieces, for me, it's very important the fact that anybody can start SMSing this artwork whatever they want. Yeah, it's a bottom-up process that is open to any comment. Yeah, in a situation like that, to me, this is extremely interesting to capture the feeling of people who are willing to express their feeling. You know, so that's, and I'm not so sure what we can do with that. Just showing it is not enough. And quite often, some of these works are works in progress, and they remain works in progress forever. They never become something complete. I don't know if they can become something complete. But to me, it feels like it is a work in progress. So ideally, I would want to see through a series of experimental workshops what we can do with this data at the next step. Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense, but
you know, I mentioned metaphor, but it could be also interpretation, because like I think this kind of work, it says something about human beings, like how we are restricted in terms of being censored.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree with you. Yeah, of course. I think it's very important that okay, one thing is the measurement of the environment, which is also interesting, particularly in the coronavirus situation. I mean, the fact that we were unlucky to have an opening, but we were lucky to capture the moment when the traffic in this very, very busy Piraeus street ceased for 1 month. Yeah, so you know, you had this environment where it's loud and noisy and polluted every day of the week, and you know, for 1 or 2 months it wasn't. So that I think that's a unique moment to capture, and of course that's why I'm saying that there's all this data in the server that now is being used as a real-time feed to create this audiovisual and multisensory presentations. But then this data can also become other things too in the future that I would be interested in investigating. That I don't know what they will become, but they might become other things too at some point.
Oh, that's great. So I don't know if anyone has other questions or comments. We should pass to Marcos now. Well, let's go ahead with Marco's presentation, and maybe in the end we can all talk together. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri, and everybody. Let's see if I can get my sharing to work. And I want to share. I want to share the screen, I think. Okay. And can everybody see this? Yes, I think you can.
Yeah.
So we're going to do this let's see if it works. We're going to do this backwards because we have lots and lots of things to share. And what's this? I don't know why that's there. I feel very, very lucky to be here with you. So thank you for inviting all of us. And I think I also enjoyed very much the presentations of Lucia and Dimitris, who in a sense provided a really good context for what I want to share with you. So first thing, arigato and obrigado for having us here. Now, let's see if this will work. Okay, so again, going backwards, I'm going to talk about various things that may be mysterious, but I really enjoyed the critical proposition of Alterscience, and it connects directly to something I'm doing called themas, and that's going to be a part that we're going to come to, because themas is basically a model very much like Alterscience, and it connects very, very nicely. But because we're also interested in seeing things and sharing visual things, I'm going to start with some work first and work to the theory step by step. So this is a diagram. It's called a Feynman diagram, superimposed on something generative that is taking up a lot of space. And let's see. And there's more of that, something algorithmic, something compositional and computational. And then this is a virtual environment. And this virtual environment was actually an environment I was just in with a group of, with another presentation this morning at the University of Miami. And it's a multi-user virtual environment. And there was a whole number of people, I think 12 people or so, are running around this environment and talking to one another and so on. And we could be doing this too. If we had organized it the right way, we could be meeting in this virtual world. Now, this virtual world is curious because there's nothing to do there. It's all about a kind of atmosphere and the kind of feeling of being there. There's some sound, there's emptiness, there are these beautiful forms, there's light, and there's this green atmosphere, which is full of debris, full of particles. And when I made it, I didn't know why it was full of debris. It started out like this without debris, and then it got filled. But it was trying to communicate something about space itself as a medium, the way sound itself is a medium that we call music. Space itself is a medium that we can call architecture. And then there are things that are inside it. And as I go backwards through this presentation, you'll see that all these things in the space, in the air, are a composition, which is kind of like a de Stijl painting or some abstract painting, but in 3D, filling all of the air. And it relates to all of these things, and this is a two-dimensional version of it. And wherever you look, it looks like a composition. That's the whole composition. This is actually a real composition that is about 63 feet by 13 feet, a very, very big composition. And the three-dimensional things are the same kind of idea, using a volume and dividing the volume into a composition. It's made of physical things, you'll see, that are calculated in a particular relationship to produce this effect. And there are these very simple shapes. And as you see the shapes, you begin to realize that they're actually Saturn. And as you go through, I'll go quickly. Eventually, you see that it's part of an installation and an exhibition that's multi-user. So there are people in a gallery and they're in a virtual space, but there's actual work around them. And there are people in remote locations and they're also interacting with one another. And there are physical designs and computational designs and material designs, and all sorts of things. There's that big wall that had to be composed. These are more pictures of the exhibition, different kinds of things in the exhibition. And as we go back and back and back, we get to eventually we'll get to the title of the composition, and it's in a Peter Eisenman building. It's in that space that's blue, and there's a Peter Eisenman building, and it's called Ringlets of Chronos. And what you're seeing here is that there's a mythical dimension, and this mythical dimension connects us to the coronavirus, actually. Wait, I need to get these things out of, hello, I need you to go. And what happened to my, okay, sorry, it's, I'm juggling things, so it went away. So this is a brief part of another paper, but the ringlets of Chronos are a reference to Kronos and Chronos, the gods of time from ancient Greek mythology, Chronos being unchanging time and Chronos being changing time. And this has to do with where this was. There's a whole story, a lot like Lukia's story about the sort of mythical background of what drove her work. But what's curious about it is that Chronos is actually related to Colonos, and Colonos is where we get the coronavirus. And of course, the virus happened in 2020 when we were under a different administration and we had a different sort of circumstance with respect to power. So Colonos was a princess whose name means little crown, and she betrayed Apollo, who is reason and beauty, for a mortal named Ischis, meaning power. So Colonos, you could think of her as ambition, betrayed beauty for power, and all sorts of things happened because then Apollo released the pandemic, and the pandemic appeared as the arrows of Artemis, and there was a crow, and many, many things happened in this story, and they all had to do with the sky being covered with arrows that we actually see in other parts of the story. So this curious VR piece wound up being an appropriate icon for what actually happened with the pandemic and with the circumstances we were under. Now let me see where my windows went because they disappeared, but I will find them. Someplace around here is my, I had them all lined up and they jumped away. So now I have to find them again, if you'll be patient with me for a second. Okay, so now let's move in the other direction. This will be a little bit more the way it's supposed to be. This is some other ideas that have to do with realities, media realities. A long time ago, I wrote a paper called Liquid Architectures in Cyberspace, and now I'm working on something called Liquid Architectures in Latent Space. And let's see if I can play this in the window. I think you can see this properly. Is that right? I think so. If not, and again, I'll go through. Now, we're on Mars. We have a helicopter flying on Mars. And we're here. That's just the texture of a very material part of the Earth. And we have this sort of strange situation with respect to each other and with respect to the other and with respect to other kinds of life. So there's an idea of Umwelt in psychology of trying to see the world through the eyes of the other. And this picture really strikes me. I should get the name of the photographer. I don't know. I found it online. But we see this very intense focus and we identify with the face. And we see these talons that are going to grasp and we identify with them as hands because we think we would grab something with our hands. And then we have to think for a minute that, well, those aren't the hands of the bird, they're the feet of the bird. and the arms are here. And so to understand the image, we have to map ourselves differently into what this creature is. And then by the same token, here's Mars and here's Athens, but this is a photograph of Athens. Ancient Athens would have looked like this, but this is a relatively recent photograph. It's in the time of photography, and it looks very different than what we know it as. And there are other photographs like this. Now, all of this is tying into an idea of a moment where we can selectively substitute one reality for another. And it connects to AI and machine learning and something called media field navigation and generative cities and all these words, which I won't explain, but all of which question where the real is. In real space, we have headphones that cancel noise, and we're coming to the point where we're going to have environments that cancel environmental noise. It's kind of one of the ideas, and this is actually true. Apple has been working on something like this for many years, and they're about to release new technologies. And so this looks at how, let's see if it'll run, what would happen if you used some of these AI techniques to change what you saw in an autonomous vehicle. So if the reality became stylized, but you could still drive through it. And what if it were controlled by AI so that the parts that you wanted to see and recognize could be seen, but the parts where you focus your vision elsewhere would be stylized. And so there's a lot going on here that I won't explain, but it's just interesting work that ties into these ideas and how to replace them. Over time, you get to a kind of breakthrough, a conceptual breakthrough of a moment where we can selectively replace reality, and that you can have levels of detail in graphics and levels of reality in what you experience, and eventually a hard reality and many soft realities, and a different reality for, let's say, a driver and a different reality for a passenger, and then you bring it to AI and machine learning. And this moves rather rapidly. I won't explain all of this yet, until finally, in the pandemic, there's some time to concentrate on some of these techniques and technologies, neural nets and something called latent space. And this is a good thing to understand. With neural nets, you have this kind of situation where you have some images that you give the program, and they get encoded into a very compressed space, data space, information space. And then to see them, they have to be decompressed into the reconstructed image. But if you force the computer to not go through, but to start looping through, moving through here, then what comes on the other side starts looking like a dream. And there are many things you do with this and techniques, which I won't describe right now, but they're very powerful. So for example, you can give it images, and just looking at one side of a bird, it can give you a 3D model of a bird, or one side of a car, it will give you a 3D model of a car. So it'll complete the reality. And then once you're in there, you can interpolate. So you can say, give me, go from here to there and show me what's in between. So in between these two chairs, there's a possible chair in latent space. And various people, and notably Rafika Nadol is doing quite well now, constructing navigations through latent space. There's other work that connects to what I'm talking about attractiveness and beauty and emotion, which there's no time to explain. But these things begin to connect in this latent space. One more little bit that I want to give you is what happens when you use these things with style, what's called style transfer. So these are images from the real-time navigation through a simulation of the city. but they're stylized according to different kinds of art, and they produce really striking images like this. Now, these, I'm showing you still images, but these are dynamic images. You can navigate through these images the way you would do if you were going through a city, and you would still see what's there. So, okay, now another thing you can do is you can segment the images and say that this color means something, and that color means something, and that color means something, and then just draw and have the computer create the reality that it thinks that means. So a drawing like that could mean this, or this, which is a little different, or it could mean that, and all that was given was just some rough colors, and the program was trying to understand what it saw. This is difficult for some people. It's not difficult for me. It might not be difficult for you, but it could be difficult. These are two stereo images, and if you know how to look at them, they contain depth. So I see them, and I literally see a deep street with cars and trees and buildings in 3D. Now, you can apply the AI to these images and produce these very strange images. And what's curious is that the 3D still remains. You can still see it. And you can see it in here, you can see it in here, you can see it in here. Like, all of these are actually three-dimensional images, meaning they contain space. They become alternative realities. So I'm just going to go through more of these without saying too much about them. This is a segmented image of a simulation of the city with AI, and these are this is a more rendered version of that same scene, and now substituted and substituted and increasingly becoming more painterly, but still recognizable. And here, this is in stereo again, and you can try this. What you'll see is that you can still see the 3D, except that now all the forms become more sculptural, and the things in between, the changes of color, become atmospheric. They become like clouds or fog inside the city. And you could be, now at this point, what you would need to understand is that you could be in a car, in an autonomous vehicle, and be looking out of your windscreen and driving through this in real time, and still be able to follow the street signals and not run over people, and do everything. Even if you take it to the point of a Pollock, which looks chaotic, this is still stereo information, and you could still navigate through it. And so these are just more and more distant. And the funny thing is, even these work, and they do it by this process. Now, the process itself is not limited to images, so you could do it with 3D. And if you did it with 3D with more steps, eventually it would start producing things. And these things, like those particular things, are actually made specifically to remind us of the work of avant-garde architectural offices like Coop Himmelblau, who are also working with AI and creating extraordinary architecture like this. Now, this goes further. I won't explain everything, but it goes back to this paper that I wrote in 1991 that Dimitris remembered, in which I had this very curious sentence that cyberspace is poetry inhabited, and to navigate through it is to become a leaf on the wind of a dream. And the picture here was a leaf falling from a tree in a wind, and not falling straight down, but sort of moving in the wind. And that was a poetic image that you could live in, but it was a data space. So it was a cyberspace of information, but navigating it would feel like navigating like a leaf in a dream. Well, that was exactly what latent space does. And curiously, that was written in 91. This is Patrick Schumacher, who's the director of Zaha Hadid Architects, finally realizing decades later, but thankfully, that architecture and cyberspace have to become connected. So all of these things are part of our lives. So that brings liquid architectures in cyberspace to liquid architectures in latent space, and why why that old idea from so many years ago is actually still pertinent to what we're doing. But it gets a little more intriguing. AlphaGo is a famous game between AlphaGame is an AI program that played a famous game with Lisa Doll, the world champion of the game Go. There were 5 games. In the second game, the computer played Move 37, which experts in the game thought was creative and was the moment where AI beat humans. The computer wound up winning 4 times out of 5, and so everybody was all excited about AI. Correctly, it is impressive. But what I found more impressive was that in the fourth game, in Move 78, Lisa Doll defeated the AI. And the reason that's important is that the AI had been training with thousands of games, and the human lost the 5 games, but actually with just a sample of 3 previous games, was able to defeat the AI. And the point here is that we're actually learning. We're in this world, and we're actually learning. And the question is, what are we learning? So here we are back in the space of Dimitris and Lukia and Athens. Again, this is in the time of photographs. This is quite recent historically. It doesn't look that way anymore. And the question is, if you were trying to learn something from this architecture that's been here for 2,500 years, what would you learn? Would you learn how to make more geometry, or maybe would you learn how to actually become the kind of people who would build that and make it valuable 2,500 years from now? So these are still photographs, and I would argue that as nice as it is to make the geometry, and I love that, what's more important is to become a certain kind of people. And the question is, what is the mission of architecture, but what is the mission of media and the things that we're doing? Very, very quickly, because time must be going out. When you're studying architecture, and probably art and just about everything else, you start from the self and you work out to other people. So in architecture, you design your own house, you design your neighborhood, you design something for your city. Over time, because as you're learning, you're also growing older, you begin to realize that you're not designing buildings, you're designing a town square, you're designing the Acropolis. You're designing actually, so the people who designed the Acropolis were designing Athenians. They weren't designing just the building. And they knew, because the buildings were made to last so long, that they weren't even designing for themselves, because they would die before the buildings fell over. We were designing for generations upon generations upon generations. They were designing for future people. And that's a question about us. What is it that we're doing that can actually be helping design the future? And what we're doing now, Salvator Mundi is a famous painting that sold for $400 million. Salvador Dali, Salvator, all of these things mean savior. And Deus ex machina, apomechaniz theos in Greek, means that the gods will save you. They'll just come down from a machine. So our more recent savior is deep learning and artificial intelligence. And we have things like the Beeple NFT, where a painting was sold for $69 million. And the notion of the aura of the original and the thermodynamics of scarcity. Now, all of this, and then a moment of turbulence. So now let me try to switch to the third part of what I have to say. And if I'm going on very long, please someone tell me, because I'm not actually looking at my clock, because I'm trying to go through this a bit too fast. Okay, so then finally, maybe, let's come to Alterscience and themas and these words that I was using. Themas is a model, a proposition, a critical proposition, I like that phrase, of a space of knowledge, but it's a phase space of knowledge that's n-dimensional. It stands for technologies, humanities, engineering, mathematics, arts, sciences. And it's not just words, it's actually a model, a space, a coordinate system. And the lines that are going through are indicating a trajectory, a path, such that you can put anything that you find, and I'll show you what I mean, in this space. So every object that you look has some element of technology, some element of values and humanities and meanings, some element of mathematics, some element of engineering, some artistry, and some science. And in the middle are the muses and making and music and many, many other things besides. So this is going to be, I wrote this down, and I translated it so you can hopefully read through. The themas model proposes a continuum across disciplines previously separated by narrow specializations. It builds on the successes of STEM and STEAM. I don't know how these are translated in Portuguese, but science, technology, engineering, math is probably the same, and STEAM just adds art. And this model, my model, adds in it the humanities, creativity, and synthesis making. So here's the problem which connects to Alterscience. Knowledge is often presented to us in fragmented form. We become informed about the parts, but lose the sense of the whole. We gain expertise, but lose balance. We propose to treat knowledge as a transdisciplinary, organic, n-dimensional continuum. Within this model of STEAM, there's a set of courses called mediated worlds that we've developed, which is kind of like your media realities, the theme for today. And in them, we examine how technologies and humanities, means and ends, engineering and mathematics, the concrete and the abstract, and arts and sciences, synthesis and analysis, inform all the aspects of how we come to know and make the world. Now, this is probably the hardest paragraph in everything I'm going to say, but it's algorithmically composed and made to touch upon this entire space. So I hope you can follow it in Portuguese, because it's pretty dense. So let me try. Touching upon themes ranging from media arts and digital humanities to virtual reality and future cinema, from generative systems and the poetics of new technologies to non-Euclidean geometries and n-dimensional space-time, from liquid architectures and new music to pattern formation and algorithmic aesthetics, from artificial life and machine learning to soft robotics and bioengineering, from world mythologies and ancient philosophies to cognitive psychology and neuroscience, from thermodynamics and symmetry operations to genomics and new materials, from quantum entanglement and live performance to synthetic ecologies and the Anthropocene, this proposal presents an interconnected model of knowledge, learning, creative discovery, and 21st century citizenship. Now, to make a little more sense of that, this is a mantis shrimp. It's an amazing marine creature that can see many more colors than we can. And so if we can see this, it can see this and that and that and many, many things besides. And so this model, as a model, like your Alterscience model, is an attempt to teach us to see in an n-dimensional way, to see more colors and more realities all at the same time. And to do this quite seriously, so these are diagrams that show there's THEMAS in a circle, or you can think of them as axes, from technologies to humanities, from engineering to mathematics, from arts to sciences, or you can collapse it into into these sort of three composite dimensions, where on this continuum something might be here, and on that continuum something might be there. When you do this, you get this space, this representation of what something is. In the middle, remember, always is M for making, for music, for muses, for mediating and modulating, for mathematics, extra mathematics, meta, matrix, and then yin and yang, generatrix and directrix, matrix and pattern, mater and pater, mitir and patir, back to the Greek, meaning this is where things are generated, and you always have to come back and figure out how to make something. It's not enough to talk about it. So that begins to turn into a kind of way of describing things, where you can literally give things parameters or coordinate evaluations and plot them in the space, and do this with several objects at once. And so now you get the difference between various kinds of objects, and it applies to all the different permutations of dimensions that we had, and these are just different ways. And to go on, this won't go on very much longer. It has various kinds of symmetries, like problem solving and problem seeking, and a curious mathematics of how many possibilities there are when you begin to try to use these aspects as permutations of all these things. So there are 720 permutations, or different, depending on how you count. There are different ways of traversing this that give you different properties. Now, okay, this actually goes farther. Again, I won't do all of this, but it ties into how you might represent all this in what did I ask it to do? In AI. And I won't explain all of these things, but they're all different parts of the model. But then it actually comes back to case studies. Like, okay, what are you talking about, Marcos? And what does this have to do with with media realities and all the beautiful things that we saw from Lucia and from Dimitris? Well, how would you characterize extraordinary objects? Like, what is actually the technology of this, and what are the humanities, the values, the laws, the myths of that, and what is the engineering of it, and what is the math of it, and what is the art of it, and what is the science of it? Like, every incredible thing in the world actually can be deciphered if we start looking at these things. So I won't show you all of these, but for example, there's something called a ben-ben, which used to go at the top of a pyramid, and what would happen if you actually looked at it that way? All at once, you kind of learn how to see, and then how to act and how to make. Or how would you understand, let's say, a knife? What kinds of knives are there? So, well, that's a knife that you can stab with, and that's a knife that you can't stab with. And the difference between the two is a difference of values. Like, it's not just the shape, it's actually what is the value system behind them. These are different knives, and they come from a different value system, and we can't actually separate these things out. We actually have to think of them all at once. And so this goes on, and you can ask yourself about the helicopter on Mars and new technologies and the history of flight, and how we actually chose to fly or go to the moon or go to Mars, and so on. I won't read all of these things, but they appear, and they have to be part of what we're doing. And I think Alterscience and this help us do that. So here's this is a pipe, a very strange pipe, obviously made of wood. It's made of bakelite. It has two figures. One of them is smoking. They're playing chess. What is it? Well, it turns out, okay, that's the technology of a pipe, but that pipe is actually part of the Cold War and part of chess. And it was actually, there's a whole history of pipes, but that particular one is a war pipe because the person on it was Stalin. That was Stalin's pipe, and the other person was the American president. And this is a peace pipe. This is a different kind of pipe in America. And there are aspects of engineering to it. And I'm finishing up, believe me, aspects of how you make these things work. And then, of course, it's not a pipe. There's Magritte. And then bakelite is actually a technology that was new. And this is a nuclear technology that was new. And this is a letter from Einstein warning about the atomic bomb. And this is a very different kind of pipe. And these things go on like this. And you can do this with any kind of thing you want. So these are scissors. Some are surgical. Some are from different centuries and cultures. These are Japanese scissors for bonsai. And these are scissors, and these are, each of them is telling a story. And we could go on, but I won't. So to end at the beginning, this is this is the website for the Themas classes. You can see that the model is a 3D model, and as you spin it, a different piece comes forward. Technologies, humanities, engineering, everything is still there. Math, arts, sciences, and this is the part that I read. And if you come here, you'll find lots of things that we have that become how we actually learn what we want. This first one is probably the most important, but you'll see we have indigenous people, and we have high tech, and we have philosophy, and we have movies, and we have Aristotle, and everything has its place in this model. And then finally, to end, this is my lab, the Trans Lab, where we do this. The purpose of the Trans Lab is to create new species of people, of genre, of work, to work transmodally. The key phrase is we're studying transformation that leads to speciation, transformation that creates new species of things. And I think I've gone long, so I'm going to, if there's more, if there's time to talk, we can do that, but I just have to find where I think this is our view, and I can stop sharing. Okay. So that would have been impossible to translate into Portuguese fast enough. So I hope people understood enough from it, and thank you.
Thank you, Marcos. That was amazing. It's just like the suggestion, because we were not able to grasp everything. There's a lot of links to be opened like that, and then maybe we can talk a little bit. I was trying to translate the most simple things, right, that I could type as fast as I could. So I was typing in Portuguese to our audience. So I
can't hear you very well, so I'm trying to understand, but I'm not sure I'm understanding everything. But that's probably okay.
I was trying to translate.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I know that was almost impossible to do. I mean, it's hard. This is difficult. There's so much that I'm trying to put in there that it's difficult, even if you're a native speaker in English. But it doesn't matter, because the point is very simple. The point is that everything is actually connected, and everything is actually one. And of course, you can look at it infinitely, and you would still run out of time because everything is going to lead you to something else. But if the presentation just demonstrated, like I think the work of Dimitris and Lucia did, you know, that you can be totally contemporary and totally, you can know about Foley, and you can know about VR, and you can make installations with found pieces and motors, and do it, you know, years ahead of time, and still know about philosophy and mythology, and still care about the indigenous people, and still care about migrant workers, and still care for one another. If you just grasp that these things aren't separate, I mean, the key thing is to understand that you can't divide everybody, and you can't divide everything and be healthy. It's like saying, you know, which arm do you want? Well, that's a crime. You know, you can't choose which arm because it's part of you. And all of these things are part of each other. And I think that what I really responded to with the proposition for Alterscience, and I think the motivation of everybody who's involved, is that it's the same motivation, that we're in a new century. We've inherited a century that broke everything, and it's up to us to try to put everything together again. And whatever, by whatever name, in whatever country, with whatever collaborators and friends, it doesn't matter. What matters is that this century needs to be for healing and for creative things, but without killing and breaking and shattering things. Enough of the shattering. That's the avant-garde for today, and for this century is the reverse of the avant-garde for last century, which was just, you know, use a hammer, you know, all the time.
So I found interesting that the three of you coming from Greece, and you use the memory of Athens, of mythology, of philosophy, of architecture, coming from ancient Greece.
I was entirely spontaneous. That, okay. I mean, we didn't coordinate that at all. I think it's just, you know, where, you know, how we think, which is also part of it. You know, it's part of this thing that if we listen, we're like, I visited Sao Paulo, and I remember when I came to visit you, Artur, and it was great. I really did enjoy that a lot. You know, where you are becomes a part of you, and you can think through it. And it's actually interesting to other people because everybody comes from somewhere. So, you know, like, you're not from Athens, but you're interested, and now you're more interested. And I wasn't from Sao Paulo, but I was interested, and years later, is it decades? I mean, it's at least one decade, some two probably, 1.5. I don't know. I've lost track. It's still part of me. You know, it's like that is part of me, and so now I make things with that.
Well, you said something amazing about time. The architects of ancient Greece, they will design buildings for later generations, and you made a parallel with yourself, with scientists. Can you comment on that? Like, how what we do today, it may be the building blocks of tomorrow somehow, or how you want to phrase it?
Well, yeah, no, I think it's really important. You know, we have amazing technology, amazing science. You know, never before have people been able to do the things that we can do. But all our media are ephemeral. All our media, you know, vanish. We can't even figure out how to put them in a museum because the computer will die, the iPhone will die, the computer will die, the projector will die. So there's a real intellectual question of how it is that we are going to leave anything for anyone else. You know, if the power goes out, it's all going to vanish. Like right now with the pandemic, it was very clear that it would have been far worse if we didn't have the internet, if we didn't have electricity, of course, but if we couldn't stay connected. Well, that could happen. I mean, it could happen that for some reason we get a pandemic and we lose the internet. And all our memory is on media that disappear. And now you have people who are trying to live in the future without memory. That's a huge problem. That's a huge problem, because in most cities, most people don't go to architecture school or art school or computer science school. Children just grow up where they grow up. And if you grew up in Athens, ancient Athens, and even modern Athens, you would grow up with the Parthenon, and it would teach you. And if you grow up in a village, the shape and the relationships in the village will teach you. And if you grow up in Rome, Rome will teach you. And if you grow up in Edo, or in Japan, the city will teach you. But you look at what we're doing to our environment, and if you take away the media, the cities are failing to teach us. At least, to speak of Los Angeles, the architecture isn't terribly good. It's not terribly civilized. It's not going to teach us very much by itself. It's going to teach us that some people can have beautiful homes. And it's going to teach us that most people don't care about public space. That's the lesson that's in the city. Well, that's an intolerable lesson. That's not an acceptable lesson. And so we have to do something.
I don't know. I recently heard that Buddha could only meet the disciples and teach about his revolutionary ideas about human beings because there was a forest that was not private property. So they have a place to go and meet and exchange. And nowadays, private property is taking over, like in Los Angeles. So,
yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, we're going to have the second half of the class with our students. So I think we have to close our section. And then, I'm sorry, because the students, they need to exchange.
Yeah, of course.
Also, and they have questions that they're asking me.
Good.
Yeah. Questions are like demands that they're making. Yeah, and then I would like to invite the three of you to say like just a few words. And I really thank you for your presence here. I think we learn a lot about both about your work and also about your identities. And and for me, like I'm very, very curious about Greece, and I would like to study much more. Yeah. So, Lotia, would you like to say something, please, for us, our students?
Yes, that was really fascinating. And thank you so much. I mean, so much to take in. I want to ask Marcos Novak if the coronavirus, Coronis semiology, all this beautiful information you gave us is published anywhere, or if it's going to be published soon. I would like to...
I've talked about it in various places, but it's going to be in a book from Italy that is then going to be translated into English. It's going to appear in several books in various forms.
Okay, I look forward. It was amazing. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you, of course. And Dimitri. Yeah.
Well, amazing stuff, Marco. I find extremely interesting the way that you comment on the new potentiality for creating form and mediated by AI. But I find it what I'd like to keep mostly right now is one of the last things you just mentioned, and I think it's very, very, very relevant right now, because if we don't actually now that the world is in such a mess, if we don't take this as a starting point to initiate some change, then we will never do, and we are really doomed. And I really like the motto of the new avant-garde should try to heal. Yeah,
we have to claim that. We just have to put it there and do it, and we're going to win. And because it's necessary. It's not egotistical. It's like in Greek you would understand instantly. It's anangi. When you get to anangi, even Zeus says yes.
Yeah, we recently started some discussion in Yasmin, but it wasn't. It didn't last for long, but it was a kind of along the same following the same lines, in the sense that what do we do now? We have to care about each other. We have to find new ways to network and work together. But I like the way you related to the avant-garde and how artists critically respond to the state of affairs. And after the First World War, Dada responded in the manner that it did, and now we need to respond in a different manner. I love that. I love that. Thank you.
And here's the other thing, Dimitri. You're absolutely right. But we have started. I mean, I think it's interesting that we're here, the four of us that I can see, but also all the people who helped put this together, and the students, and your students, and yours, Lucia, and mine. We have already started. We just have to connect and grow until change happens. It's not that we should start. We should start every day, but we also have started. That's why we met. That's why we overlap. That's why the ideas are actually very happy together. I mean, they're they say, hey, I know you. I know that idea.
That was great. Thanks.
Okay. So the students say thank you to all of you. They are seeing you through YouTube and some of them through Facebook. And that's the way we have been organizing, through StreamYard and then release to them. It's not always the best architecture, but that's how we did. So thank you very much. And hopefully, like sometime in the future, some of you will come to Brazil, to the University of São Paulo.
Mm-hmm. We would love to.
Well, we should all meet on a Greek island. Clearly, I mean, I think that's the right idea, and of course Brazil, because Brazil is extraordinary, just amazing. So let's do that. Artur, one small request, if it's possible. I'm sure Dimitris and Lucia will agree that we're all very curious about what questions your students might have. And so if you can put them together, if it's easy, if it's not too hard, and send them to us, I think we would be really delighted to see what they would ask.
I'll be glad to do this. Like we can even then see parts of it, and then maybe we'll send you for some more papers, and then maybe I could talk with them, and then start a dialogue with you. That would be nice with all of you. So yeah, it would be nice to have some form of continuation in some media, one or another. And then actually, I would love to know more about what avant-garde art, what kind of avant-garde art, writing, science, and humanities is happening in Greece today.
There's a lot. There's a lot of amazing articles.
I wish you could go and visit. Maybe after the pandemic, like we may end up in Athens or something. I don't know. Who knows, right? Yeah.
Well, I'll propose this. I don't know if it's possible, but Dimitri and Lucia, the fair thing to do would be to organize something like this with Brazilian speakers in Athens.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Right? That would be the natural thing to do to make the bridge better. And I think everybody would be delighted. Don't you think, Artur, that you would be able to propose people who would love to do that, just like we love being here with you?
Yeah, I would love to do that. I find myself naturally in curatorship of events, symposiums, and I try to connect with Brazilian indigenous people and with Black leadership, and then today we need more and more of like people from abroad seeing what is happening in Brazil and actually how everyone is fighting, everyone is trying to resist. Like Brazilian Indians are trying to resist, Black communities are trying to resist, Brazilian women, and many of my students, most of my students are women, and and they are here today because they want to get an education, and there's some islands of resistance. Like
I think women will probably save the world. The way we're going, it's gonna have to be that the women save the world, because the men aren't moving fast enough. What can you do? But fine.
Women are majority in Brazilian universities. More and more, the number of women rise.
Great.
Yeah, that's what's happening. I'm very glad about this idea that I will try to work on this, like, to make a presentation of Brazilian new science, new humanities, new writing, and somehow present it in Athens. It would be wonderful to do that. I think we have to wait for political change in Brazil, because it's like we are in a turbulence. We are in unimaginable political situation, unimaginable for any standards. It's hard for us to believe what's happening. So it's like, I don't know. We will talk about somehow. Like, we are all afraid here. Actually, we are afraid to talk, to mention, to resist, to do whatever.
Yeah, that's sad. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there'll be better days.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah, that's my wish for that. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we had a dictatorship in Greece. I remember it. Probably, Marco, you remember it too, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, I grew up with it. Yeah.
Me too.
I was.
So
part of my formation.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's. Yeah, we know what it's like when you lose freedom.
Absolutely.
It's a problem.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. It was so great seeing you all.
Yes, absolutely.
Now I have to go get my own vaccination. Lucia, it's the same day too. It's like.
Have a good night and have a good day.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for
Thank you
everything.
so much. Γεια σου Μάρκο μου, γεια σου Λουκία.
Γεια σου Λουκία, γεια σου Δημήτρη. Bye. Bye Artur.
Γεια χαρά. Γεια.
How do we leave? There we go, leave. Bye.